Hi guys, so if any of you have been following along with my Earth Sketch challenge, then you'll know that I've been painting a lot of landscapes recently, so I was really in the mood to try something different, and portraits are something I used to do all the time. I don't do them as much now, but I really enjoy painting portraits, and watercolour portraits in particular are quite challenging because, as with any watercolour painting, you really can't fix your mistakes too easily because once that washes down, there's not really much you can do. I'll explain some of that along the way. I'm painting Timothée Chalamet today because I've been watching a lot of his films, especially Call Me By Your Name is just like so good, and I'm a bit obsessed with him. So let's get into the painting. The first thing I do once I've chosen a photo is I crop it so that it's the correct proportions to the A3 paper that I'm going to be using, and then I bring it into this app on my iPad called Grid Hashtag. You could just use Photoshop, or there's probably loads of different ways to do this, but basically I make an 8x8 grid and then I copy that grid out onto my actual paper, making sure that it is the same proportions as the actual picture itself. And then I basically just go through and use that grid to help me draw out the face with the correct proportions. I find that using a grid makes it so much easier to achieve a likeness. And if I tried to do the drawings without this grid, it definitely is a lot harder. The method that I'm using is a lot about planning ahead and knowing what you're going to be doing for each layer. So this first layer that I'm going to be doing is a shadow layer, and it's completely blue. I'm using cerulean blue to do this. You can use pretty much any blue. Phthalo blue works quite well, but I'm just using cerulean for this one because I feel like it's a slightly more muted blue, which I don't know, I feel like it suits his face for some reason, so that's why I went with that. And I basically just go through, and wherever I can see any kind of shadow, I fill it in basically, and that includes the background. And yeah, it looks a bit weird at this stage, but it's quite helpful for mapping out where all the shadows are on the portrait. Then I wait for that layer to dry completely, and then the next stage is something that I learned from a course on Domestica by Ale Casanova, and it's basically a wet on wet layer, and you wet the entire page, and then I'm using a mixture of quinacridone rose and yellow ochre to just add a bit of warmth to the portrait. It's quite a subtle stage, and you really don't want to use a strong amount of paint. It's a lot of water going in at this stage, but it really just helps balance out the cool blue that you've obviously added at the very beginning. Then I dry that one. I started using a hairdryer because I just couldn't be bothered to wait between the layers. And the next layer is a yellow layer, so I'm using yellow ochre here mixed with a little bit of quinacridone rose, and it just starts to build up the more natural looking skin tones, and I just apply that basically wherever I can sort of see it in the portrait. There really is no real right or wrong to this. Then again, I wait for that to dry, and I go in with some more warm tones, and this is for his hair, and I try to blend the hair section in with the rest of his face. You really don't want hair to stick out too much on a portrait, so whenever you're doing each layer, try to incorporate it with the skin tones as well, just so that it all blends together, and even the same with clothing or any other part of the portrait. Then I dry that layer, so it really is just building up a lot of layers and switching between warm and cool. So I'm doing another warm layer here by the looks of it, and it's more going into the shadows now. You want to add quite a lot of red in the nose and the ears and the mouth, so I do try to add a bit more warm tones in those areas. Now I'm going in with a slightly cooler brown and just adding to those shadows. This portrait has a lot of shadows all over the face, so it's really important to get those in. With watercolour it is quite difficult to get really dark, so you do have to add quite a few different layers if you want to get a dark effect. I know that some watercolour portrait painters just avoid using too many dark tones, which can look really good as well, but for this one I wanted to give a bit of that dramatic shadow because the original image has a lot of shadow, so I kind of wanted to reflect that in my painting. And then this stage is similar to the stage that I did right at the beginning, so I've washed the entire face and it's about adding a little bit more of those yellow tones because I felt like it was a bit red and I felt like I needed a bit more yellow in the face, so that's what I'm doing here. And then finally I go into the background and just add in a bit more shadow. This step isn't always necessary if you get the background right first time, but I just felt like it needed to be a bit darker. There's a chance I might have added too many shadows here because it really is hard to find that balance between making sure there's that contrast and then making it look a bit too contrasty. So I'm still not sure if I did do that or if it kind of just looks a bit stylized, or I'm not really sure, but anyway, I still like the end result. I think if I did this again I would probably stop before this stage because I think I might have gone a bit too far with the shadows, but who knows, I guess it's all subjective. And that is the final result. So I'm peeling off the tape, which is my favourite part. So here is the final painting. I don't know what I'm going to do with it because it's really big and I don't know if it's normal to have a giant portrait of Timothée Chalamet on your wall. It was good practice and I've definitely got a long way to go when it comes to watercolour portraits. But with this method that I've been using, it's been really helpful to just have a process and something that I know is repeatable and I can try it with lots of different types of portraits. If you like this video, then please give it a like and hit subscribe and let me know if there's anything you want to see from me in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.